welcome to day 2 of Anatomy of a Resume. So I hope you were able to make some progress yesterday on the first 3 sections of your resume. And today we're going to continue working on that by looking at section 4. That starts off with our work history. So I know a lot of our kids at school have had jobs while they were in school, and kudos to y'all, that's great. It shows a lot of responsibility on your part to be able to work and go to school. But we want to highlight that as well in your resume. So if you look at section 4 of your worksheet, it gives you examples of how to list your job. Again, let's remember when we're talking about a certain business or a certain job type, those are proper nouns, so we're going to capitalize those. We're going to make sure we're spelling everything correctly and that everything's very neat on our resume when we type it up. So today, you're going to list the company that you've worked for. So I've given you an example in the box below. So the company name, I worked for Jack's Restaurant, so I listed that as the company name. Underneath that, you're going to want to list the city and the state that that company was, where that company was where you worked. So I worked at the one at Brookwood, Alabama. So you're going to list those 2 things. Your job title, you want to be very careful that this is something that is descriptive of what you do, but doesn't make it minimize your job. So if you can put something that sounds a little more important than what it is, I mean, don't stretch it too far, but just be sure that you're providing accurate information. So if you are a cashier there, or a cook, or a manager, those would be words that would describe things that you would do in that industry. So if you don't know quite how to title your job there, then ask your advisory teacher, and I'm sure they can give you some suggestions about what your job title should be. Your dates worked. So you're going to want to list when you started and when you finished. So if you're still working there, you would definitely just put the date you started and then a hyphen, and then you would put the word present because you're still there. Now, the next thing you're going to do is list the responsibilities or skills gained or any awards you got at that occupation. So if I worked at Jack's and my job was a cook, then I'm going to list the things I did as a cook. So maybe I prepared food for cooking. Maybe I cleaned the equipment. Maybe I worked as a team member. So those are just a few examples. I would say you need to list about 3 different things that you did as far as responsibilities for that job. So what if you've had more than one job while you're in high school? Then that's great. So you're going to want to list all of that information. I would start with your most present job and list that one first. And then you're going to repeat the same information below that in your resume for the next job or the job before that you had worked. So again, the company name, company, city, and state, the job title, the dates that you worked, and anything that you learned from that job or responsibilities that you had there. So just some reminders, most recent job first, and then go back to older jobs. And make sure you're giving correct information when you talk about the job that you have. Make sure it's the correct name and location. So if anyone wanted to track that back and get in touch with that occupation, they would have the correct information. Okay, so that's number 4. Now let's talk about number 5. So this is really your section to brag all about yourself. You remember last week we talked about volunteer hours, and every grade level this year is required to have those volunteer hours, and this is part of why we want to have you do those hours, because it's very, very important for you to have something to go under this section, and those volunteer hours will fit perfectly right here in section 5. So the first thing that you can list are any other skills you have. So maybe you're really good at videoing things. Maybe you were on the mass media team, but that doesn't really fit into the occupation that you had at Jack's. So you don't really video anything at Jack's, but you want to let the person know, hey, I've got mad skills with videography. So under other skills, that might be what you list there. is, working well with a camera. I understand certain programs that you use for videography. So any skills that you have that you feel like could be beneficial to someone else, please list those there. I would probably list those in a bullet format where you list them and go to the next one and make each one like a separate bullet. However, you could also use a comma if you wanted to list them out that way. So non-work experience would be those volunteer hours. So it's anything you're not getting paid for. So if you babysit your sister, and of course you don't get paid for that, that could be volunteer hours. If you cleaned up trash after the ball game on a Friday night, that could be volunteer hours. So you want to list what the activity was, where it was done, when it was done, and how long it was done. So for example, cleaning up trash at the Brookwood High School football stadium. And then I would list the date, October 7th, 2021. And then I would list 1.5 hours as the length of time. So that would be how I would list that volunteer experience. The last section, or the last thing under section 5 is actually our references. So typically, you need to include at least 2 references. And you want to be sure that you have their correct contact information so that the person reaching out to them can get in touch with them and get information about you. Remember, these are people that are helping you get a job or get into a program or get a scholarship. So be sure that you're picking somebody that's going to say really good things about you. If you got fired from your last job and your boss hates you, I probably wouldn't use that person as my reference, okay? A couple of things that I do want you to know about references. You probably shouldn't use, actually you never should use a family member. Be sure that it's somebody that is not related to you as a reference. I would also try to use one professional reference, which means it came from your work environment, and one personal reference, which means it's somebody that knows you outside of work. So your personal reference could be a coach. It could be someone at school like me, your counselor, Miss Rutledge, one of the administrators, your favorite teacher, somebody that's over a club you're a part of. Those would be great personal references, or even like an adult who was a personal friend that could vouch for your character and say great things about you. So that's personal references. Professional references are related to your work. So this would be your boss, your manager, someone who owned the company, a supervisor. Sometimes it could be a coworker, but usually it would need to be somebody that had kind of been in a management position over you that could really say wonderful things about you. So again, remember, we want 2. And when we get their information, we want to know their name. Again, remember, a name is a proper noun, so capitalization matters. We're also going to want to know the company that they worked for. So if your reference name is Sam Smith, and Sam Smith worked at Jack's, then I would list Sam Smith, and underneath that I would list Jack's, and I would give his position. Sam Smith was my supervisor, so I would list that, and then I would either list his phone number or his email address. So very important that you talk to your references ahead of time and you say, can I use you as a reference? Because there's nothing worse than somebody putting you down as a reference and you not knowing about it, and you getting a call and maybe you didn't have a good experience with that person, and then you're in a bad situation and you don't really know what to say. So clear it with the person first, and then list their name, their place they work, their job title, and their email or their phone number. Remember, it has to be accurate information so you can hopefully get the job when they contact them and talk about how wonderful you are at your place of employment. So, really quick, just flip over to the back after you've had a chance to do sections 4 and section 5. And I want you to look at a few tips that I have for you. This is very important. We hear this from business and industry over and over and over again, and we want to make sure you're successful. So, number 1, always be honest. Tell the truth. more people don't get jobs or lose jobs because they lie on a resume. So don't let that be you. Number 2, don't use the word I. Write in third person. So don't say I did this. If you need help with that, see your English teacher and they'll be glad to help you. Always include dates that show when you were at a place, when you were involved in something. Please don't put your age or your birthday on there. That's not information that anybody needs to have to be able to hire you. Remember, a resume is a snapshot of who you are. So it should be very brief. It should not be paragraph forms, long sentences. It should be short and to the point so that I can pick up this piece of paper and I can see who you are from 1 or 2 pieces of paper. Okay? Proofread. Please look over it. If you do it in something like Microsoft Word, it has spell check for you. It will tell you if things look wrong. Always let a friend look at it. Let a teacher look at it. There are lots of people who will give you advice on how to make it look its best, okay? Please don't make fonts really big to take up the whole page. Like if you don't have information to fill, it's okay. But don't stretch out your name for half the page because employers don't want to see that, okay? Make sure it's very neat, that you hadn't wadded it up in your truck or spilled your tea on it this morning. So make sure it's clean and neat. Again, we talked about our references. And then the last one is just a little cue to help you. Use action verbs. So these are things that you can do. And I've given you a list of a few of those at the bottom that you can look at. And those are the words and those skills and abilities that you'll want to be sure and include. If you do this, I promise your resume is going to look great and you're going to be ahead of the game because you're going to have everything ready. So you've taken everything, you've written it out on your worksheet. Now your next step is to find a computer, go into Microsoft Word or some other program that you like to use, and there are tons of templates there. All you have to do is take this information and just type it in where the section is. It should look fairly similar. Have someone proofread it and then save it and print it out and you're good to go. I hope you get the job and thanks for hanging with me today.